1-11-3. Agajir Dynasty. The Jabgusas of Agajir were called Balawars, chieftains. This word was also pronounced as Balchua and Balthavar. The sons of Jam were Narji-Arbai and Janarish. Janarish's son was Arish, his son was Jalmat, his son was Sarish, his son was Darish, his son was Talish, his son was Berish, his son was Laish, his son was Kermes, who died at the age of 60 shortly after Jam fell asleep. After Jam fell asleep, Javshin, the son of Kermes, became the king of Sanjak Bulgar. After that, generations of sons came as kings: Harjin, Barin, Atruk, Kalag, Ujjak, Torjak, Kairak, Tulak, Baishug, who had two famous sons Aslan and Kushtar. Under the reign of Baishug, Jam awoke and became king again. After the death of Jam, Baishug ruled again for a short time, and his son Aslan ruled after him for 50 years. Aslan's eldest son was Agaj, who had a son Bailish. Bailish had 5 sons: Balagaj, Ruja, Jalish, Balin and Bar, who became after the death of his father the emperor of Agajir. To strengthen the state, he settled his brothers in different parts of Axiap, which happened 100 years after Jam's death. After Bar, his son Erman became the emperor of Askip, and generations of sons Kalka, Bur, Tal, Tiriak, Quack, Ulag, Tulak, Balak, Salag, Jilak, Uruk-Balkan followed. Jiliak's other son, Bish, tried to take power from his brother, and great disturbances arose. Uruk defeated Bish, who liked to call himself Bishigit, and fled to the Akasai Oka River, which is why this area came to be called Bishigit, the Tizajet. Uruk-Balkan began to rule in 3897, before the Berta War, 4550 BC, when he was 30 years old, and ruled until his death 60 years. He was succeeded by his son Biliak, and generations of sons followed: Shirak, Barak, Tarak, Arak, Alak, Bulak, Kulak, Uchat, Ushak, Karak, Barak, Abalak, Muanak, Junak, Shunak, Asbak, Ardak, Arjak, Burjak, Sanak, Bunyak, Adak, Balak, who had 2 famous sons Mijak and Kubar. Then a disturbance arose, caused by Mijak. In the year 3100 before the Burmese War, 3753 BC, Mijak defeated the Emperor Kubar, and the children of the defeated were forced to flee for their lives. One of Kubar's sons, Aspar, fled with his people to Ayonbistia, Baltica, and the second, Ishtik, took his people east to Ajimdan, Isden. Aspar's son, Kutar, or Alip Kutar, caught a glimpse of his clan's power over Askip. He was a zealot warrior, and by force extended his power as far as Aliptor, the Alps. After him the Jabgusas of Askip were followed by generations of sons Idar, Baidar, Tudor, Mer, Tork, Bayuk, Janak, Anjuk, Bajuk, Barsak, Sanduk, Kural, Baigal, Tughal, Ural or El-Ural, who restored the unity of Agajir, Askal, Bakal, Tukal, Ajmal, Bural, Ariel, Kural, Maral, Kaval, Kichiural, Bish, Targan, Vargan, Shurkan, Urkan, Birgan, Turgan, Chulgan, Kar or Haran, who was married to the daughter of the Altbeka of the love-passion Ura, Vidra, Bulgan. Ishtik, having resided for some time in Ajimdan, found his neighbors in the east to be rather weak. He therefore conquered everything east of Ajimdan and northern Hin, China, establishing his chief capital on the Hin River Kubansu, Huanghu. Ishtik and his descendants ruled Hin for 1,000 years and became a great Bulgarian tribe, often called the Shtyaki by their neighbors, in memory of Ishtik. The Ishtiaks called themselves Tgari, Tahari, because that is how they pronounced the word Bulgarian, often replacing the original B with a T and shortening the word for easier pronunciation. In remembrance of the fact that under the Ishtik descendant, Tamir Ulan, son of Tamir Bulgar, the Ishtik Tgars emigrated from Hin, because they did not want to fight the Borohos or Bagrajis dragons. The Ishtik were also called Barajis or Bagrajis. This happened after 1,000 years of Hin rule, by the Ishtik descendants of the Hin tribes got tired of submitting to the harsh rule of the Bulgar Tigars, and they called the evil Alp and Devas to their aid, promising to pay them for their release from Bulgar rule with a large tribute of youths and maidens. The evil Alps, fearing the Tagars, assumed the guise of Borohos, and so attacked the Ishtiaks. The Alps correctly perceived that the ambitious Bulgars would not offend the dragons, and withdrew from Hin without a fight. One part of the Ishtik Bagrattis went to the Kones, the Bulgar Huns in Mongolia and Pribakalia, another to Kichatuzgar, Korea, and a third, led by the Ishtik Tamirulin, returned to Ajimdan Isidan, western Kazakhstan. Tamirulin was also called Askal, Sage, and Caves. The Ishtiak Barajans greatly revered the wolf, the dog, and the Alpha Chulman, whom they called Tunburi, so Chulman often helped them. Having spent some time in Ajimdan, Tamirulin, with some of his people, and the Urmias took possession of Idle, Volga Bulgaria. The Agajir Bulgarians began to call them Hints, because they came from Hin. Until now, the Volga Bulgarians are called Kints and Volga Bulgaria, Kinel, i.e. the land of kin. From Idle, some of the Bagrattis migrated to Sunjak, where they named a local river Kubansu in memory of the Hin Kubansu, Huanghu, and after mixing with some of the Bulgar Basils, called themselves Baranjari or Balinese. The other Bulgarians called them simply Balinese. From Sanjak some of the Ishtiaks moved to Karasaklan, Ukraine, where they renamed the river Varzai with the name Tunburachai, Dnieper, and laid the foundation of the Balinese and Norburians, Inurites, in Herodotus. At Agajir Tamirulin encountered the daughter of Harran and Bulgan, the imperious Saklan, the same great sorceress as her mother. She ruled Askip after her father's death, because Harran had no sons. During her reign, which began in the year 2050, before the Burton War, 2703 BC. One of the descendants of Ishtik, the son of Tamir Bulgar, Caves Tamirulin, was also called Astalip, because he was wise, was the son of Tamir, and was descended from the Ishtik, or Ishtikalit family, i.e. Astalip in Ajimdanese. The Ajimdan Bulgarians even until the 11th century, in many words, changed the initial sound I into A. For example, the Idle Bulgarians say Istan God, Lord, King, and Elon or Elon, and the Ajimdan Bulgarians say Aston and Alan. Also, the Ajimdan Bulgarians often drop the initial B and K. For example, they pronounce Bulgar as Olga, the word Berlik as Orluk, Kala, city, castle, fortress, etc., as Allah, etc. After the death of Tamir Bulgar, his sons Caves and Bulgarguz, ancestor of the Oguz, divided Ajimdan into two beyliks. According to the will of Tamir Bulgar, who was a ruler and a Kelbir, the Kamak Karatash, which called bad weather and rain, was to remain with Caves. But Guz kidnapped the real Karatash, and gave his brother a false one. When, in the dry years, fugitive Bulgarians, called Wisans, or Uyghurs, Kashans, Saraguns, and Akumis, came to Ajimdan, Guz did not take them in, but sheltered them, hoping for Karatash. But when he called for rain, he found that he had been deceived by his brother. The wrathful Kavers attacked Guz and at first drove him out of the Bayat area, which is behind Aktai, so Guz people began to call themselves Tuzis, Uzis, Bayots. But after some time, Guz's son, Bayat, drove Kavers and his people out of Ajimdan with the help of the Baraja dragon, Kazil Jar, who lived in the mountain of the same name. From this mountain the Baraj reached the lake Bulgar or Bulgar Sabarkash, whose water he loved to drink. That is why the lake was named Baraj Kiul, Dragon Lake. When the Gujars fled to Bayat, Kazil Jar asked them for sacrifices in exchange for the right to settle in his area. The Guz, with a heavy heart, took his son Bayat to the mountains and left him on the Baraj. When the Baraj asked to eat him, Bayat told him, "If you eat me, your joy will last 4 days at the most. But if you spare me, I will make my father give you my sister, an indescribable beauty, and your joy will last for many years." The Baraj liked this offer and spared Bayat. Indeed, Bayat made his sister become the wife of the Baraja, and they became friends. And when Bayat asked for his help in the war against his uncle, Kuziljar helped him and drove away Askel's men. The people of Askel fled from Idle to Seba, and because of this they began to be called Sebarites. Some of the Bagraj remained in Seba, and are known there as Ishtiaks till now. When he moved with his people to the eastern part of Agajir, which was then Idle, caves Askel Tamirul and Astalip asked Saklan to grant him lands to live in a part of Basel, a northern Pre-Caspian. However, Saklan, whose mother's father had been the Bey of the Basels, did not want to bother them and refused him. With great difficulty Askel found among the forests a large clearing called Halja, or Asna, at the confluence of the rivers Balgadanish of Volga, and Aktanish, or Chulmanakama, where his people settled down in the narrowness, and took to cattle raising. In honor of this meadow Askel also called himself Halja, glorious. The waters of the river Balgadanish, which since time immemorial has also been called Balgadan, Ada, Bulga, Burga, Arja, Ara, Rudja, Rudjan, Ruianu Volga, in the spring flooded almost the entire meadow, and then the people climbed the heights of Chulim, whereas the town of Subosh, or Halja, today's Ulug Bulgar, a great Bulgar of the Volga. This town was founded in 1453 of the Bulgarian era, 13500 BC, by the Emperor Ulbulgar near the Karamai shrine of Subosh, which was prepared by Karthjam in the year of Bulgar, 14953 BC, on the day of Tarjais, June 22, to commemorate the founding of the first Bulgarian state of Idle. The city of Kaja was also called Bulgar, Alatura, with all the names of the river Arja mentioned above, as well as Bulamata, father of cities, Beershah, first city, and Tura, city, because it was the first city on earth. By the time of Askel, the city was desolate, but he revived it. Under him, as sung in a song, a stone pyramid, Kurgan, was erected on the Chulim hill, in the Subosh Karamai, protected by a moat. This kurgan was erected over the tomb of the Emperor Arbizayaji Jam, or Kartjam. The rebuilding of Halja Bulgar is believed to have taken place in 2047, by the time of the Burmese War, 2700 BC, when Askel's young son, Boyon, was 10 years old. When Abarkam arrived here some time later, Bulgar was named Abrashir in his honor. When Boyon grew up, Askel told him, "Our Halja cannot feed all this people, so take some of the people and go wherever you want. My big son Boris and my middle son Baluan will stay with me." Boyon took some of the people and entered the dense forests. He wandered for a long time, but once near a lake he met the Marjalish, son of the Alpha Chulman, Ilmar. Ilmar said to Boyon, "I will help you if you promise to do my bidding someday." In love, Saklan allowed Boyon's people to settle in Agajir and married him. By watching her, Boyon learned magic from her. Learning that Askel had ordered Baluan to leave Rujan Bulgar with his people, Boyon lit a huge fire, and, with the help of the Alpha Gilia, spirit of the winds, burned the forest along the shores of the Karabulgar and Bajpur, a Black and Azov, seas. With this he opened the way for Baluan from Ruyan Bulgar to Agil, Balkan Peninsula. Baluan crossed into Agil and settled with his people on the shores of Lake Barajban, Dragon Lake, Lake Prispar, where his Sai Agil, or Ugil, was born. At the bottom of this lake in an underwater palace lived Agil's former lord, the son of the Alpha Chulman, Agil. When his domain became noisy, Agil secluded himself in the lake, but ordered the people to bring him 7 most beautiful maidens as sacrifices every year. When the people forgot to bring the sacrifices, Agil became enraged and drove them away. In Agil the Bulgarians of Borlan took to calling them Bijamandani, Bazerman, Myrmidonians, Boyani and Marisha, which word is a corruption of Baraj. They were called Bijamendans, because they came from the Biharmen Beylik. When Likul restored Ruyan Bulgar, the chiefs of the neighboring Bijaget, Tizaget, or Bilari submitted and formed a Beylik. One part of the Bijagets, speaking one Trek Bulgarian and 2 Kara, Finnish, dialects, pronounced the word Bulgar as Bidja, or Bigger, and another as Buga, or Burgash. There were more Bajajets speaking Bidjar, and that is why the Rujan Bulgar Beylik got its name Bidzhaman. The Bulgarian word means place, land. And since some of the Bijan Bidzhaman, Pionymyrmidonians, led by Agil, did not offer sacrifices, they were expelled from the shores of Barajban. They migrated to Erthagil, Thrace, and headed the Thracian tribes of the Baraks, Thracians, and Biris, Illyrians. These tribes began to call themselves Bijamendans, i.e. lordly people, or Trek Bulgarians, tribals, speaking a new language, Trek Bulgarian, Turco-Bulgarian. And since then the word, Bulgarian, received the meaning, great man, important man, glorious man, master, noble, aristocrat. Saklan, on learning that Boyon had let Baluin go to Agil, became angry and put him in chains, for there was a prophecy that a son of Baluin would come from Agil, and seize the throne of Askip. With the help of magic, Boyon freed himself and fled to Ion Bistia, Baltica, where he formed his own kingdom. Saklan tried to defeat him with spells, but he defended himself and was left alone. In the new place Boyon was welcomed with joy by his friend Ilmar. When Boyon decided to marry a noise girl, Latina, Ilmar asked him to cede her to him. But Boyon refused and married the noise girl. Thus he broke his old promise, which he had made to Ilmar. Ilmar complained to his father Chulman, and asked him to punish the oath breaker. Chulman decided that it was useless to punish Boyon himself, for he would stand any test. And he recommended that they should wait till his son Asgalib, the noisemaker, grew up, and when he became the dearest thing in the world, then they should take him away from him. That would be a real punishment for him. When Asgalib grew up, he became the favorite of Boyon and all the tribes in Bistia. The Shumbut, Lithics, called Boyon Mendek or Bulgaldek, the Shumgals called him Kalib, and the Murgbash, Estonians, called him Kalibban. Asgalib performed many feats. He defeated the Karakalgians, glorified, and drove them back into their swamps, and he named the areas liberated from the Magach Bulia, Belarus, and Bibulia, Poland. In due course, Chulman ordered Ilmar to summon the mighty Asgalib to a duel on a cliff above the sea, and to throw him into the Sea of Ion or Balta, which in Huda means Bulgarian Sea Baltic. In the duel, Ilmar managed to trip Asgalib, but both fell into the sea. In the water, Asgalib surrendered to the Alpha Chulman. To free Asgalib, his sister Arabadal accepted to become Ilmar's wife. Asgalib inherited the throne of his father, who retired to Tavastay, Finland, and lived there in the form of a bear. From Asgalib all the Biyas and Bargs of Ion Bistia, Tavastay, and Karel, Karelia, are derived. Everyone remembers that more than anything in the world, Boyon loved to play the tamer, or dombra, tambura. And when the inhabitants of Tavastay see a bear, they rush to treat it and give it a kesel dombra, gusla. The Tavesti Bulgarians or Sukam, Sea Bulgarians, call the kesel dombra kamteli, i.e. the tongue of the Kam, recalling the times when the Kam priests played them. At that time the son of Baluin Agil gathered an army of his Baraks and Bulgars, and took the capital of Agajir, Bagail. The Agajir people recognized him as their emperor. Saklan fled to Rujan Bulgar, and frightened by her arrival, Askal's third son, Boris, handed over the power of Bihamen to her. She soon bewitched him and became his wife. She not only left him on the throne of Bihamen, but also helped him in every way in his rule. Some of the Basils of Kavaltay, Prashaspet, her kinsmen, recognized the authority of Saklan and Boris. The Basils of Rujan Bulgar, who were called Bori and Barbari, i.e. true Bulgarians, began to call them also Bertasai, i.e. shaved Bori. The point is that the Bulgarians of Ishtik, having settled in Idzimdan, mingled a lot with the neighboring Kashanis and adopted some of their customs, including the custom of shaving their heads, and leaving only one lock of hair on the forehead, chumbas, or silchak, the Bulgarian hair. Under the patronage of Saklan, not only the Rujan Bulgarians, but also the whole of the Bidzhaman and Biliasubi, from Lake Unji Oniga, to the AK Bulgarian, Kasti, Sea, lived peacefully for many centuries. After the death of Boris, Saklan handed over power to her children, and she herself retired to a cave and continued to protect her domain with the power of magic. Agilus became emperor of Askeep 2000 years before the Bataean era and ruled for 53 years, 2653 to 2600 BC, after which his descendant sons succeeded. Around 1600 BC, the emperor of Askeep Kulian had two sons, Balagaj and Kudan. Kudan was succeeded by his son Asban. Balagaj had a son, Lugan, who died in Bulgar-Atriac, Troy, and Lugan had two sons, Darliturgan and Turdan. Darliturgan ruled after Asban, and ordered that Askeep should also be called Sibyl, a country of horses, from Sib, horse, and Illinois, country. After some time, the peoples invented another name for the Burmese state, Azil or Otil, which meant both Bulgarian land and country of horses. Darliturgan ruled for 5 years, and was overthrown by the ancestor of the first Khmer dynasty, Suztargis or Suzatriac. A war for power began between the dynasties of Darliturgang and Suzatriac, which lasted 30 years, 1542 to 1512 BC. During this time, as emperors of Askeep or Sibyl, emerged Suzatriac, his son Asparake, and Darliturgang's son Sandalai. From the San, power in Askeip was taken by Bulgar Bulia and Tarjatai Borkate, son of Basil Bushlii, married to Asparake's daughter Banjar. This was 859 years before the Bataetian era, 1512 BC, and 1000 years before the attack on Askeip by Darius in 512 BC. Bulgar Tarjatai, whose dynasty was called Borkatian, renamed Askeip to Kaib Bulgar, i.e. Horse Bulgar, for which he became famous forever. Tarjatai had 3 sons, but power passed to his youngest son, Kaldale. He was followed by his son Magil, his son Bulia Kurdat, his grandson Mirdaegir, the forefather of King Lear, who had no sons. But his power was inherited by the best of his sons-in-law, Nukrat, who was married to his daughter Ilya. Nukrat was succeeded by Balthas, who reigned for 20 years, 1200 to 1180 BC. Bulia Herdath had a son, Erdat, and a daughter, Alanol, who married Cuban, son of the Alpha Chulman. The son of Erdat, ruler of Imen or Berlin, right bank Ukraine, was Narat, his son Arat, his son Sarot, his son Burat, his son Alat, who took power from Balat in the following manner. Under him, the Mokadan and Kabul Bulgarians, who oppressed the Serbian Turbash, Pralini, dominated in Agil. Serbi is the area between the Serbi River, Spring River, QV, the Varbas River is Bosnia, and Baluba or Maruba, i.e., Bulgarian River, the Morava River, QV, and Kabul is the old Bulgarian name for Midjan or Mysia. The capital of Kabul was the city of Kabul, which the ancient Thracians called Karban, the sunny city, from the sunrise, Nd, Kavana. In Thracian, Kar means sun, and Bun means city. In Trek Bulgarian the word, Bun, took the form Bul. Some believe that it is from Karban that the word, Bulgar, Bulgarian. The other Bulgarian tribes envied the glory of the Kabul Bulgars, and called them bastards. Sir in ancient Thracian means spring, and Bai is river. Both words are present in Trek Bulgarian, only with a changed sound. Sir becomes cap, and sir, and Bai sir, madam changes its meaning to river, because the ancient Bulgarians called the rivers madam. When the Serbian Turbashis, relatives of the Bulgarians by lineage of the ancient Thracians, rose up against the oppressive Mokadani and Kabul Bulgarians, Alat together with his Galician Turbashis, Pralini, helped the rebels, and Balta, who helped the Mokadani and Kabul Bulgarians, was defeated. Balta with some of the Macedons and the Kabuls moved to Burtas, Volga-Urals, where his people became the basis of the Halji, Middle Volga, and Bashkurt Bulgars. In this case, Kalja and Bashkort mean the same thing: a hilly area, less often a forest, and Ja and Yurt a district. The K, Sound makes it easier to pronounce Bash and Yort. Alat, having become emperor of Kaibalta, Scythia, moved most of the Galician Turbashi to southern Agil, Greece, the Bashatari to Birman, northern Black Sea coast, thus strengthening the position of the Serbian Turbashi in northern Agil, Mysia. In response to this, the grateful Serbian Turbashis began to call themselves Trekbali, i.e. Trek Bulgarians, tribals in Turbashi, and most Trekbali were in fact absorbed into the Bulgarian nationality. And the Galids area between the Ineshdar, Dniester, and the lower Isdar, Danube, got its name from the Bulgarians who migrated here from the Galids of Kapta, Kolis, Kuzul Irmak in Turkey. Ialake Kotrag, son of the Emperor of Ilit, Western Asia Minor and Peloponnese, took power in Kaib Bulgaria from Kulak, as the last representative of the Agajir dynasty, and established the Second Cimmerian dynasty in 327 BC, 980 BC. It ruled in Askeep for about 320 years, until 660 BC Ialake Kotrag allowed only the descendants of Emperor Balta, who ruled in Berta Askeep, to remain in his lands. Under the Emperor Tuja, about 700 BC, the most valiant Bulgarians settled in Idle the Basils, the most true Bulgarians, and he gave them the domain of Tuga, Toha, on the lower Volga. That is why Tudza got the nickname Tuga, Toha, and the southern Volga Basils Tugars, Tokars. Due to the fact that the Basils became an example of the brightest Bulgarians, the other best Bulgarians began to call them Tgari. It was thanks to the Basils of Tjar's son, Bertas, and his co-conquering son, Moji, that they succeeded in driving out the Cimmerians in 671 BC, and in inflicting a heavy defeat on them in the Near East in 661 BC. Hence Bertas also took the names Bergen, Berjak, Basil, Bergentai, Tuga, the names of the Basiles, for whose bravery they were also called Urusi, i.e. braves. Under Bertas the city of Halja Rujan, or Bulgar Gru, became populous and a strongly fortified city. Many Yiris, Syrians, and Aryaks or Armenians also settled here. The town was also called Subosh, Bertas, Aryon, and for the people all these words now also meant Bulgarian. Of the descendants of Ialug Kotrag, the last Jabgusir of Askpa was by Jil, with whom the second Kaima dynasty perished. Some writers say that it was deposed 10 years before the Burmese War, 663 BC, and others 7 years, but not later than 660 BC. Others say that the expulsion of the Cimmerians took place 18 years before the Burmese War, and the elevation of Bertas to the throne 11 years after the doom of the malignant Majil. The Cimmerian dynasty was overthrown and fled with some of its Bulgarians to Tarvil Pontus, northern Asia Minor, and Bertas became Jabgusir of Askeep, and called his dynasty the Chua dynasty. This dynasty is also called the Idelska. After the overthrow of the second Cimmerian dynasty, also called the now Elan, or now Alangu Novosme, the throne of Ascoip was seized for almost 500 years, by the representatives of the Chua, or Idle dynasty of the descendants of Bertas, and the Agil or Rajil dynasty of the descendants of Avakam Rajil. But in Askip at that time an important role was also played by the Dogar Oki, Agajir dynasty of the descendants of Kulak, the Isdar, Danubian, or Kichiascape, Lesser Scythia, dynasty of the descendants of Barak, the Tukchi dynasty of the descendants of Tui Moji, and his son Alban Jalmat, Sarmadian or Kanjal dynasty of the descendants from Ural's daughter Korteji, Utig dynasty of the descendants of Utig Bal Kazakh, Mokidan dynasty of the descendants of Baelish, Sandagak, or now Elan, dynasty of the descendants of Bajil's son, Dale Lekton. The most famous sub-agencies of the Azar branch of the Bulgarian kings include Kotrak's son Bulgar, his son Uja, his son Kanjal, his son Tukal, his son Ruja, his son Bashtar, his son Baidar, his son Nusha, his son Jermai, his son Almai, his son Tura, his son Buga, his son Ajay, his son Jumantai, his son Rodeb Orjak, his sons Taras and Turgis, his son Zitalgal, his son Idol, his son Sudan, his son Kalish, his son Beriakriash Uliat, his son Kirbulgar, his son Kirpi, his son Jalish. Dale's son, Sandagak, who became king of Tarvil Pontus, returned with a part of his tribe to Askeep and received from the emperor Moji the district of Jeremel, a middle Jeremel. Some of his people remained in Kapkai, Ohir, and the others moved to Jeremel. Sandagaka's son was Lekidon, his son but Orbuji, his son Baijan married the daughter of the Alp Chulman, Ajin. Baijan's son was the great Sagatella Timjan, his son was Jalava, his sons were Idil Sheila and Ada. Ida had a son, Javur, who was killed in 206 BC of 447 BC. Idil Sheila had a son Baijia, who lived 85 years, 460 to 375 BC, and a daughter Erim, who was given in marriage to the Bulgarian king of Barak, Thrace, Zitalgaos Italcus, according to Herodotus. The sons of Baigius were Baitish, who had two famous sons, Buljak and Imen, and the second Karajar, who was killed in 243 of the Batian era of 410 BC. Baigia was in power in Jeremel for 28 years, 440 to 412 BC. His son Baitish was the Subag of Jeremel for 38 years, 412 to 374 BC, his son Iman for 9 years, 374 to 365 BC, after which he perished in Bijon 4. Next to him was Buljak's son, Ilsebek, 365 to 320 BC, for 45 years, and after him his son Dare, 320 to 293 BC, for 27 years. Imed's son, Alabuga, was adopted by Emperor Atius Bagairas the Latius, in Eastern Greek, was co-emperor with Atius and Bican Balamir for 55 years, 365 to 310 BC. Alabuga's son, Buljak, ruled Jeremel for 42 years sin, 293 to 251 BC. His son Cubar was emperor of Aeschylus for 20 years, 250 to 230 BC, and then for 15 years of Sibyl, or Attila of Scythia, 230 to 215 BC. His son Arzan or Cartharzan Kashan, co-ruler with his father and then independent emperor of Askeep for 22 years, 220 to 198 BC. Kashan's son was the great Bulgarian storyteller Kuban, nicknamed Boyan, who died in the year 501 of the Batian era, at the age of 59, 211 to 152 BC. The most famous representatives of the Tuga dynasty are Bertas, who became emperor of Askeep in 17 BC, and ruled single-handedly for 20 years, the 670 to 650 BC. His sons were Katrag Uliat and Moji Jalmat. Moji was co-ruler with Bertas, and then emperor of Askeep and united all the Bulgars from Kuzil Aiba, Spain, to Hin, China, ruling for 27 years, 650 to 623 BC. The son of Kathrag Uliat was Bulut, nicknamed Askal, the Subag of Idil. His sons were also called Askali. The next Subag is Buluk Askal's son, Lekalip, followed by his sons the Subags Kart Barin and Atay the Birkam, high priest, Barin's son Targan Asherik, his son Kunduz, his sons Avar Deba, Nushordan Moshe, and Alva Magais. Magiz had two famous sons, the Subags Mardan and Oordan. Next came Mardan's son, Uran Rujan. Oordan's son Boris Tiger was emperor of Askeep for 27 years, 402 to 375 BC. His sons were Na and Suna. Suna was Subag of Idil for 32 years, 342 to 310 BC. Suna's son, Baraza, nicknamed Kicha S. Little Biruli, 310 to 291 BC, Subag of Idil. His son Burjan was Subag for 28 years, 291 to 263 BC. His son Saklan, 263 to 247 BC. His son Idilmoji, 243 to 209 BC. His son Nasuvar, 209 to 190. His two sons Namoji and Sebamoji. Narmoji had two famous sons, Subarmoji and Sebamoji. Subarmoji's son Alan Burshud was a Subag, 140 to 114 BC. He assisted the Jaldic and Burshud Subak Kelbia Sibyl in the war against Hirasan, city of the goddess, Chersonesus, which was later called Kryashan. The defenders of the city succeeded in kidnapping Alan's 10-year-old son, Savmak, a favorite of the father, which forced Alan to end the war in order to save his son, and he soon died from the stress. After Alan Burshud, the Subags or queens of Idle took turns, his eldest son Tashuran, Hard Uranus, his son Aslan, his son Targan, his son Tugan, his son Turjan, his son Buran, his son Bulan, his son Kushuran, his son Kurdan, his son Aryon, his son Mardan, his son Aldain, his son Tatran, his son Aden, his son Tudan. Old Tudan accidentally failed to join the Bargs, who came out against Bulumar in 363, and he received from him in return from the new emperor the honorary title of Tur, i.e., faithful friend, which was used as far back as Khan Almesh Jafar, 895 to 925, and was inscribed before the name of the Sabah. But Tudan soon surrendered the power to his son Bashdan. After that, the Sabahs of Idle were his son Zardan, his son Ildan, his son Arzan, his son Alip, his son Talip, his son Tanip, his son Kalib, his son Uzgur, his son Urga, his son Ungar, his son Bainur, his son Kungur, his son Tanga, his son Ural, his son Kural, his son Kargal nicknamed Suzbay. Kargal was most fond of composing songs. He ruled Idle for 17 years, 845 to 862. Like his predecessor, Urga, who refused to carry out the edict of Jabgusir Kakan Kurbagal, emperor of Hazar, 653 to 675, for the division of Idle into two Beyliks, that of Chermish to Askal and that of Bulumar to Asparakal Asparu, who was exiled there with some of his people from Bajpur or Bosphorus. Alip refused to carry out the edict of the Kakanbek Arslan, emperor of Hazar, 870 to 921, to surrender Dorshir, the extra-Kamar part of the Chermish Beylik of Kalja, a Bulgar Beylik, to Mumin. Then the Kakanbey sent to Dorshir from Karasaklan, Ukraine, 5,000 Baranjars, led by Tuchabarin, who succeeded in capturing Alabuga and forcing Kushalip to appear before the Kakanbey. The Kakanbek first put him in the Zindan, but then pardoned him. Tukchi-Barin was given the honorific name of Alabuga, left the Baranjars, headed by his sons Tulush and Yuzman, in Dorshir, and returned to Karasaklan for 890. The Baranjars quickly found a common language with the local Khaljians, or Abdali Eftalites, called by our Karajim, Khwarezmians. The Abduls are 7 speakers, are descendants of the Bulgarians in Abdul or Ak-Burjan, Pakistan, also called Ak-Burjans and Burguntai Burgundians. Tarjais Burjan, emperor of Askip on the border between the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC, exiled some of the Burguntai to Kashan, Central Asia, where they intermingled with the Kashan and Ishtik Isidonians, Bulgarians, and others to Baal, Central Europe, where these intermingled with the Salem European natives. Even before that, other Bulgars had conquered Kermek, and were called Galigians, Agoli, and Kapta, where they subdued the Shagumi tribes, for the natives of Misho Asia. Speaking at first a mixture of the Agil, Aglorian Illyrian Greek Thracian Armenian, and Bargia Persian languages, the Burguntai in Kashan very soon adopted the Trek Bulgarian language. They gave their districts in Kashan the former name of their homeland Abdul Asid Moraki, in Trek Bulgarian, which is why the Kashanese call them Abdul. Eventually the Abduls became part of the Kashan Bulgarians, and only their fair skin, blonde hair and blue eyes separated them from the other Kashans. From the Abduls inhabiting the border with the Bulgarian Huns, the other Abduls received another name, Sarguns, i.e. white Huns. The Koran Kashan Bulgarians, calling themselves Gori, called the Abdul Saragori, i.e. white Gori. The Abdulis were the most sincere Bulgarians and called themselves and others by the word Bulgarian, or Bulia. The mountains south of the river Agaz, Vaksh, they called Bulia, Pamir, the mountains north of the Agaz they called Kurash Bulgar, the mountains on the right bank of the Surdoria Erta Bulgatau, the mountains south of Idesa Alma Bulgatau, high, or colorful Bulgarian mountains. The Abduls who had settled in central Barjil, Persia, west of Isfahan, called it Moji, or Barji Bulgar, Median or Peripian Bulgaria. The area north of the Hindi Gash, Hindu Kush Dash, Hind Mountains, the Abdulis called Bakta Bulgar, Bactria, and the Khorasan, Khorasan, Mountains Burjan Bulgatau. At the Jabgushir of Askip, Agajir 150 to 189 AD, a considerable part of the Abdali settled in the area between the rivers Arja, Ruja, Volga and Or. It was from these times that the Arja, which the Turks called the Bulgar, Volga, it adopted the names Ruja, Ruja Bulgar, and the Middle Urals was called the Bulgate, Poundulga Mountains 1. When the Saxons, i.e. the Black Huns of Bulumar arrived in the 4th century, they pronounced the word Bulgar as Buga, or Buka, the lands between the tributaries of the rivers Jake, Elakan, or they called Kichi Bulgar, Little Bulgaria. The local Hun Bulgarians, the Burjats, who came from the Burjat district, Buryatia, and the Irkuts, who came from the Arakaitai, or Irkut district, South Baikal and Transbaikalia, were the bravest men of AK Bulgaria, or Volga Bulgaria. Since those times, the name Ural has been frequently changed to refer to the northern Urals, also called the Rebri or Ripi, and Jugre, Yuga, mountains, and the southern Urals are more often called Myjar, Ulutau, or Mugajar, wolf, or dog mountains, from Ulu, Mugai, Nugoy, wolf, dog. And the leader of the second branch of the descendants of Bertas, Madjajalmat, 650 to 623 BC, annexed the land of the Akbash, Asiatic, Bulgarians, Saban to Askip or Sibyl. The native sons of Moji Jalmat were Juras, or Jur and Buluan or Bulan. After Moji, the emperor of Askip became Juras Aryon, who ruled for only 1 year. However, after him, Idon of the Agil dynasty became emperor of Askip for 20 years, 622 to 602 BC. After Idon, Moji Bulin, i.e. Bulgar, nicknamed Bulan, Deer, became emperor for 2 years. He was followed by Idon Lex son Asparik, Spargapit in Herodotus, Kungur, Nyer in Herodotus, ruled Askip for 30 years, 600 to 570 BC. Kungur by various wives had famous sons, Gijat, Angarit, Saban and Saul. But after the death of Kungur, Bulan's son was chosen as Jabgusir of Askip or Atil. Kuban, who reigned for 12 years. After him was Kubalman, after him Tarkuban, after him Taivi Echkabash, his son Jamantai, his descendants Shorosh or Tatrashorosh, Daesh and the 5 heroes, Karthuga, Bel, Askal and Julit, Barak, Karthaspar and Kichiaskal, etc. etc. Karthaspar, his son Njlar, his son Anja, and his son Hijabat were the Barak, high priests, of Askip or Atil country of horses, Scythia. Kichiaskal, his son Manas, his son Arat, his son Burat had the title of Subag of Burjan pre-Caucasian, which survived as far back as Bear, who became Subag of Burjan in the year of the death of Atil's emperor Tuchaboris, 210. The son of Tatrasaros, Atay Orden, 375 to 339 BC, was the first Jabgusir of Askip or Sibyl, who liked to call it Bulgaria. Under him, the records of the government were kept in the Trek Bulgarian language, and the records of the affairs of state, of the state archives, ND, were written in Agil letters, Bulgarica, from which the Glagolitic and Cyrillic alphabets were borrowed, ND. The evidence of the existence of this writing, which has been lost to us, is of the utmost importance and shows that the Bulgarians were a highly developed ancient civilization, with its own writing system, which was most actively used more than 1,200 years before the work of Cyril and Methodius. At the same time, it suggests that Constantine Cyril most likely had this ancient Bulgarian script at his disposal, which he used for his work. Arbat's son was Belek, his son Chibik or Baraj Moji, nicknamed Urusman, his son Urusman, his son Suvar, born 175 BC, etc. Coming to Hijack, his son was Ishtik. After Hijack died fighting the tax collectors of the insatiable Ulutarkan Quebec in 983 AD. 330, his son Ishtik and Tuki, son of Ishtik, fled, and Tuki's son, Uruz, was left fatherless. But Tuki's friend, Vil, adopted him and subsequently raised Uruz's two young children, Sar and Jamin. Once, the mad Bulgarian Subag of Iskal, Ukraine and Beulah Russia, Kerman, the Goth chief Germanic, who helped Quebec to do his outrages, brutally killed Vil's daughter. In response, Sar and Jamin so injured Kerman that he was disabled for life and lived permanently in a sitting position at that time, the Emperor of Atil-Bulgar, Kama Bega, being a vassal of Quebec, sided with the Ulutarkan Quebec and the Subag Kerman in the conflict that arose, thus forcing Vil to side with the Huns of Bulumar Balamba, the future Emperor of Biggar. The family tree of the Urusbars. Tuki had a son Uruz and a daughter Herka. Herka became the wife of Emperor Bulumar's son, Alupbi. Uruz's son, Jangiz, became under Tuki Attila, Kapagan, Prime Minister of Atil-Bulgar or Dzunga. Jangiz, who died a year after Attil's death, had a son Kadish. Kardish was Kapagan under the emperors Elek and Jangiz. When Kardish perished 10 years after Attil's death, 463, he had sent his son Tailish with the state archives to the Saraya chair of Belkermek, Attila's younger son, and, remaining in the Saraya of Jangiz IV, perished there. Tailish became for 19 years, 463 to 482, Kapagan under Emperor Belkermek, who ruled the Bulgarian Empire for 26 years. Thanks to Belkermek, then Askip or Sibyl were more often called Atil-Bulgar, Bulgar Isle, or Bulgar Jamlak, Bulgarian Empire. After the Urumans, with the help of the Houthis, Goths, drove Emperor Kermek out of Karaburgan, Danubian Bulgaria, to Karabulgar, Chernigov, Ukraine, in 482, Tailish dismissed himself from government service and returned to Burgan, where the Beylik of his ancestors, Julut Kabardino-Bachkaria, was preserved in the Suba of the Tukchis. Tailish returned to Burgan as a Croatian, Christian, and his descendants practiced Croatian, Orthodox Christianity, for a long time. Therefore, Julut became an attractive place for many other Christians to migrate from all over Kapkai and surrounding countries. Tailish's son, Daish or Kart Daish, Old Daish, under the influence of his father's fascinating accounts of his life, became seriously interested in history and in 1163 AD, 510, wrote the history of the Hun Bulgarians. The descendants of Kaf Daish are arranged as follows: the Baish, the Karish, the Balish, the Agish, the Jantish, the Berish, the Laish, the Altish, the Argish, the Targish. Tartish played a prominent role in the so-called Kubar turmoil that began in 197. Then the Jagbusir Kakan of Hazara, Burat, or Jurburat, 805 to 813, abolished the post of Ashin Kakan, high priest, and ordered everyone to pay tribute to the Muslims who established the Islamic Hazara state. This the Kakan did at the insistence of the Balta War of Jeremel, the basin of the northern Donets and Don, and the Kushtu, Shti, of Sahib Bilal. After inciting the Kakan to such a risky decision, Sahib Prelatli refused him help when the impostor Kubar came out against Burat. This scoundrel, who declared himself to be a descendant of Kurbat, Kubrat, the 7th century king of Great Bulgaria, was in reality the secret Jehud Talmudist, Kanuk Karnak, who had outraged some of the Borodjoshim Chechens, the Karasalas, and the Mayars, i.e., the Bashkorts and the Ishtak Mugajars, Dog Mountains. The Mugajars are the Bulgars of the southern Urals. The Balta War of Ilit, eastern Pre-Caucasus, Azmishmanas, brother of the Sabanjar, prime minister of Hazar, Abishmanas, marched against the impostor, who proclaimed himself the new Ashin Kakan, but was defeated and killed by the rebels. They also attacked Samandar and hanged Mullah Gabdullah. The Borthavar of the Seba and the Magyars, Ugur, then took possession of Lubat, the former Zarkant, a Bulgarian town at the mouth of the Jake Urals, the future Sarajchik, and appropriated to himself the nickname of Lubat, or Inishtik Ulibat, united with Kanuk Kuba, and together with him defeated and overthrew the emperor of the Khazars, Burat. Kuba then proclaimed Ugur Ulibat as the new emperor of Hazar. Burat lost due to the fact that Tartiish, dissatisfied with his reforms that harmed the rights of Christians, did not support the emperor. But Tartiish did not join the scoundrels. And the young Borthavar of Karabulgar, Idar or Uruz Idar, being on the side of the rebels, fought off from Burachai a detachment of the Borthavar of Karaburgan, Koriam Krum, who was going to the aid of Burat, and received for this the title of Ugur or Viceroy of Karasaklan, Ukraine. The newly elevated Ugur Uruz Idar then arrived near the city of Karak, around which Kuba and Ulibat had besieged Burat's camp. It was then that Tartiish rescued the deposed emperor by appearing with a militia of Kunduz, Soli, and Uruz in front of Karak, and forcing the rebels to let Burat and his Baranjars through the Shodon and Burachai, Dnieper, into Beerman or Beerman, a western Black Sea, from the siege. Afterwards, Ulibat's son, Attil, sent in pursuit of Burat, secretly agreed with him for peace and allowed him to leave for Taburja, Dobrudja. The Karaburja Borthavar Karaim gladly welcomed Burat, who had come to him, for he had counted on his help to take Istanbul, but the Urumans, frightened by his intentions, poisoned Karaim. In 820, thanks to the initiative of Attil and Tartish, Burat, Uruz Idar, Attil and Tartish decided in alliance to put an end to the revolt of Kuba and the outrages of the Juresh Jahuds and Karasals. The same year the allies defeated Ulibat in Beerman, and Burat, with his Baranjars, managed to transfer from Beerman to Tashbalin, right bank Kiev Oblast. Kuba together with Ulibat headed towards Bashk, Kiev, but near the town of Ertebulgar or Kharkov, he was intercepted by the army of Burat, Uruz Idar and Otil. The army of Sahib Bilal, commanded by Bertaz, was also stationed near them, but they did not take part in the battle that began, for the cunning Bilal and Bertaz decided to join the victors. The allies, with the help of the hastily come to their aid detachments of Karaim's son, Jamortek, Omerta, Khan of Danubia, and Tartash, defeated the Jehudi rebels completely. The first to flee was Ulibat, followed by Kuba. Bertaz passed Ulibat through his troops, but captured Kanuk and unexpectedly proved to be the hero in this glorious battle. The arrested Kuba was condemned and crucified on a wheel, as a particularly base criminal. The corpse of the executed man was burned, and his ashes were thrown all the way into the Syrian desert, the place where Tangra commanded the most abominable Alps and savages to dwell. Kaysbar's skull was buried under the crypt, sarcophagus, of Azmaishmanas in his tomb at Samandar, near Makakala. Ulibat surrendered to Martatjesh, converted to Islam, and was pardoned at the request of Otil, and all the captured Jehudis were killed. Bertaz, on Sahib's orders, then helped Bulash, son of Besaman Tukchi, to become the new Jabgusir Kakan of Hazar. Bulash ruled from 820 to 838. On the sole basis that a treacherous sweeper and secret Jehud Kubar Kanuk had proclaimed himself as the Ashin Hakan, the Jehuds, Talmudists, and their mercenary writers, started calling the holy Ka of the Bulgarian Islamic statehood Hazar in the kingdom of the Jehuds, and this is outrageous and intolerable. But even more bitter than this is that some Haydarids, the dynasty of Uruz Haydar, or Uruz Idar, ruling Volga Bulgaria from 865 to 1584, beginning with Abu Ishaq Ibrahim, 1006 to 1025, began to introduce this Jewish blatant lie into Bulgarian annals. The Haydarids feared that Hazar would be restored and they would lose the supreme power, so they spared no effort to discredit Hazar. The trouble with the chaste truth is that too many of the world's greatest powers wish to make it their corrupter. The land from Suldan, Danube, to the Sea of Names, Pacific Ocean, is still called Bulgaria. The greatest sultan, Muhammad Nasser Totemish, who is also called Trekmen Muhammad Turkmen, ordered his kingdom to be called Bulgar Kipchak, i.e. the Bulgarian steppe. And it was so and long ago called in the form of a skeep, Bulgarian steppe, field, by the ancient Bulgarians, and in the form of Bulavez Bula, Bulgarian field in Ulchia Slavic, by the Urus or Russians. It should be clear that the word Bulavez is one of the most ancient Bulgarian names, consisting of bul, i.e. Bulgarian, and avez, i.e. man, in Old Bulgarian. The descendants of Tartish are Barish, Arish, Baljish and Turish. Turish's son-in-law, who attempted by force in 931 to restore the imperial throne of Hazar to the Tukchis and perished, was Dia with Makron Ysh Bulgar, who, for the help he had given his father, was exiled from Julit to Utik or Tamaya, eastern Pryazavi, and there converted to Islam. The son of Daish was Aliish, and his son was Danlai, the glorious Naaman, whose Desheria Aliyah became the wife of the Bey of Kuban and bore him a son Karajay. It was Naaman, also called Kartnanman, who produced the chronicle Dastani Tari Zaman, Tale of Temporal Years Percent. His work was continued by Karth Daish. I, Daish Karaja ul-Bulgari, son of Alim Beg and grandson of Gabdullah, have continued this history, incorporating here narratives from the most trustworthy writers, and have named the new corpus after my forefather, Naaman Tarim. One Bakhtiar Mijar had a son Karajay, his son was Azim, his son was Gabdullah, his son was Alimbek, who married Vargi's daughter, Zainab. The son of the glorious Naaman, who was born in 960 and died in the year of the writing of the Vault of Kart Nariman in 1037, was Sutirman, his son Gazizjan, his son Zakir, his son Bashir, his son Tahir, his son Bakir, his son Boris, his son Faiz, his son Rofiz, his son Ramiz, his son Vargiz, my grandfather, who died in 1352. 68 years old when I am 27 years old. In general, we, the descendants of Magi, are called Belini, i.e. Old Bulgarians. This name Belin in the west they call it Buljan, in the north Balta, in the south Bilan. For us, the descendants of Magi of Kapkai, the form Bilan fits best. Burtek Bilan's ancestry is according to the Tarjais scheme. Their capital was the Bilan fortress in Kizil Juresh, southern Dagestan. The last in the family tree are Radik, and his son Varsik, or Vasil. Radik was ruling Kuzil Juresh when suddenly, at that time the childless mob of hateful Tatar freaks, the author's words, with the help of the Jehudis, started crawling all over the world. In 1222 the Tatars conquered Alban, Azerbaijan, and part of Gurja, Georgia, and tried to conquer Timucapa, Derbent. However, the emir of Timucapa, Rashid Asmar, promptly summoned Radik Bilan to his aid, and he and Abish Marnaz's detachment repulsed the fierce attacks of the Tatars and Turkmen. Then the Jehudis in Alban bribed a Burajaresh, Chechen, Bey, and he made a villainous attack on a trading caravan in Kizil Juresh, and spread the rumor that Radik had committed this robbery. The ambassador of Chelbia, Khan of Volga, Bulgaria, instead of rewarding the Bahadir for his heroism, arrested him and imprisoned him in the dungeon of Kailan Castle. Almost all the beys of Kuzil Juresh were outraged at this injustice. When they gathered together, they came to Kailan Castle and demanded that Radik be released. The clerk, the secret guide of the Jehudis, was frightened and fled, and the beys released the Bahadir. The clerk presented the matter as a mutiny in Chelbia, taking advice from his responsible people, including the Ulf Beg of Sarshin, Bokman, took the decision to leave Kizil Juresh. Carrying out this order, Abish Marnaz left Kazaz el Juresh, and Rak was left alone against the treacherous enemy. The same Burajaresh Bey Jehud in 1223 led the Tatars to Burjan through a pass in Burajaresh, and they conquered Ilit, eastern Pre-Caucasus. The vengeful Sada, wanderer of the Tatars, Subatay, sent against Radik his son Chambek with 5,000 Tatars, 12,000 Turkmen, and 3,000 Ilit Christians, Wassetians. In the fight against the 1,200 defenders of Bilan, or Milan in Karajan, all the Christians died, but managed under the protection of Tatar archers and Yortigans, stone throwers, to capture the city. The Bpaijt rushed into the fortress, and after a terrible logging forced the surviving defenders to retreat to the high tower. Usually in Kapkai, the opponents only plunder the town and settlements, and do not storm the towers where the last defenders are hiding. But Chambek, like all Tartars, was particularly cruel and ordered them to storm the fortress tower and kill everyone in it. However, for the assault he sent the detachment of the Jehudi Bey, Radik's old enemy. Radik and a few dozen of his fighters succeeded in killing all the Jehudi Borjaresh, and they were not less than 500, after which the Turkmen joined in the attack. Losing no fewer men, the Turkmens took possession of the tower and slaughtered everyone in it, including Bahadur Radik. Radik's son, still a child, tried until the last to shield the Bahadur's wife from the blows of the swords. When the woman was struck down by an enemy blow, Vosil fell from her relaxing arms and drowned in blood. Only Radik's cousin, Hasanbek, son of Kaderbek, managed to escape from Bailan. Through the mountains of Jaresh, he reached the mountain refuge of the Tuchis, Markatau. With the permission of Barshalki Tuchi, he gathered from among his men a detachment of 500 men, and went to fight against Subiatai. Near Stari Sandagak, Stavropol, the Tartars almost surrounded him, but he managed to wound the Tartars Sardajib and escape to Aryon, Poptor region. There his detachment was infiltrated by many people, and he called it a Buliak, a regiment of 4,000 to 6,000 fighters. When the Tartars approached Aryon, Hasanbek attacked them and killed Chambek. He buried Chambek's head in the tower, where the Bahadur Radik died. At the very beginning of Caves AE in November 1236, after having defeated the Kisana Kutters at Saran-Saransk, he unexpectedly for the Tartars crossed the Idle Volga and entered Ulug Bulgar. With his appearance he raised the spirits of the Ulug Bulgarians and they defended their city with his help. After that he marched from Ulug Bulgar to Samarkand, or Kavul Bulgar or Saray, and everywhere killed the Tartars. Around Samara he captured the Tartar embassy, half of which consisted of Jehudi, and massacred every single one of the ambassadors. Having stayed a short time in Bokman's army, Hasanbek returned to Aryon and destroyed 10 Tartar caravans at Kurvan, 1237 to 1238, on the way. When the Tartars besieged Kizil-Kozilsk, in 1238, Hasanbek, together with Karamir's army, attacked them and drove the garrison and some of the people out of the city. He then made an attack on the Tartars in Jeremel, and in 1239, together with Kedan, Kotian, he went to Samarkand and there helped Bokman to defeat the Tartars. At the request of Barshalki he went to Markatau, where he helped to hold the fortress and organized raids on the Tartars until Birkai Khan Burk, 1256 to 1266, came to power in Karayulist order. Birkai declared Shalki and Hasanbek as Bargs and Tarkhans of the Alan Bulgarian Beylik established in Bergen, forbade the Tartars to enter the Bulgarian towns and villages without a royal order, and the two Bargs ended the war that lasted 33 years. The Tartars called the Alan Bulgarian Beylik Baka. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more amazing historical insights. Want to support my work? Join me on Patreon, buy me a coffee, or Ko-fi to help keep these stories coming. Until next time, keep exploring the past, it shapes our future.